Hello, and welcome back to In Focus, the show where we discuss how creative outlets allow individuals to manage their mental health and share their stories. In this episode, we'll be talking about art through mental health and the effects of lockdown. To talk with us about this is Hannah Smith. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and your degree.
Hi, my name is Hannah Smith and I'm studying my third year of fine art at UCLan.
And what are some of the topics you discuss within your artwork?
So currently I have just finished a series. That series is called Monuments of Society, and that looks basically at different aspects of the cost of living crisis that has affected me personally. So I have 3 paintings. They're all massive paintings, 6 by 4 foot, and they are just different depictions of everyday life being reclaimed by a natural landscape, which is something that I did before in my work. I did a lot of landscape painting, but this time I wanted to include real serious topics being sort of engulfed by these natural landscapes.
That's very interesting. So what made you choose art?
Oh, well, basically, since I was a child, art has never really felt like a choice. It's sort of just been like a really naturally, sort of organically occurring thing with me. As a kid, I would just draw and I'd paint constantly. And as a teenager, I really sort of used art to sort of explore sort of boundaries and limits of what I could do. I did a lot of really scary sort of horror-based art, and I think that was just me rebelling at the time. And then as I went to college, I really wanted to focus my art in sort of a different way. So I did textiles, I did fashion and things like that. And that just sort of went by the wayside because I just thought, I'm only doing that for somebody else. It wasn't me that wanted to do that. So then as soon as I went to university, I was like, yeah, I'm doing art, just art, and I'm going to really focus it on it. And I just feel like, yeah, it's just been just one of those things. I can't imagine art being like not in my life, basically.
Well, you can tell you love it there. It's nice. It's a nice passion. So how has art impacted your own mental health, would you say?
I would say that it's a holiday for me. That's what I describe it as. It doesn't matter what I've done that day, how stressed I've been, how awful something's gone. As soon as I get home or I go to my studio and I sit down, my brain instantly engages with what I'm doing and it's focused, and every bit of outside noise or sort of internal monologue finishes, and it's like, I'm going to do this painting now, and that is my focus. And I just feel like it really helps me just block out the world. And in turn, with my artwork, I create these surrealistic type worlds of my own, and it's like something that I can control and have sort of, just a say in what goes anywhere, and it's like this place that I can just escape to. So I would say that my artwork, in terms of my mental health, it really is like a safe space for me to just sort of explore ideas and block out everything else, really.
It's so important, isn't it? I think everybody needs that.
Yeah.
For sure. So how did your artwork help you through lockdown then, through the pandemic?
Right, so basically, when the pandemic started, me and my 2 children, we had just recently moved, within 6 months, moved to the place that we were living in. We live in a little flat in the middle of nowhere. It's in a really rural area of the countryside, and we hadn't really explored any of the surroundings, and then all of a sudden lockdown hit. We were stuck inside, and we were allocated by the government 30 minutes a day of outdoor exercise, and we really took advantage of that. It was instantly like, right, we haven't gone to this field, we've not gone to this hill, we've not gone to this lake, this river, this stream. So in that 30 minutes, let's leg it, let's go and see what there is out there. And we really used that time, and it became like a really special time for us because we didn't really have a lot of time to spend together until the pandemic. So we'd go out and we'd explore these areas and we'd have a really nice time, and then we'd come in, and it was like this feeling of just being suffocated and trapped when we got inside, because it was like we were in this little tiny 2-bedroom flat, and it was like, and then at night I suddenly got this feeling of I just want to paint what I've seen. So I started doing these landscape paintings, but instead of them being sort of bog standard landscape paintings, everything's what you would expect. I really sort of played with it. I'd not really done a lot of painting before this, so I was really sort of challenging myself. I'd do really vivid sunsets, I'd do mythical characters and monsters and things like that, and everything was really sort of fantasy and surreal. And that, for me, at night, as soon as the children were in bed, I would do these paintings, and that, like I said, was like a holiday, and that really helped me sort of escape how trapped I was feeling and how suffocated I was feeling.
So you recently submitted your dissertation, so congratulations.
Thank you.
So what is it all about, and why did you choose to write about it?
Right, so basically my dissertation, it was Art and Psychosis Through a Looking Glass. That was the title.
Okay.
And it basically, I first started looking at the concept of art therapy. That was something that really interested me as a career. And then the more I looked into it, the more I realised that the people that could have art therapy as, you know, a treatment, they were in a very privileged situation, whereas either they could either afford it or that they had made it through the waiting list to receive it. So I then started looking at, you know, what was before art therapy, because that was something that came about in sort of the mid-20th century. And I looked into sort of mental health and how mental health support has changed through time in the UK from sort of the 18th century all the way up to the present day. And I noticed that there was a quick shift during the time that people were in asylums, where art was suddenly seen as a diagnostic tool for people with schizophrenia. So schizophrenia patients would be creating these really sort of imaginative, really vivid artworks, and psychologists were able to look at these artworks and depict what was going on with them inside their minds, and that was something that was really developed on. And I just found that so interesting, because for me, obviously, if you have schizophrenia, it's almost like you're seeing another dimension to everybody else. There's something else that you're seeing that is completely individual, completely personal, and no one else on the planet is going to experience what you're experiencing. So to be able to use art as this tool to sort of show the world what they are seeing and what is going on, I just find just so incredible and so important. So I started looking at case studies of these individual artists through time that were using their artwork, and also people that had a completely different art practice before their symptoms of schizophrenia came on. So for people, for example, like Louis Wayne, an artist whose works went from being very sort of commercialized drawings of cats that we got him very famous, to then, after he had his diagnosis of schizophrenia and his symptoms emerged, was his cat drawings became really psychedelic, really imaginative, really colourful. And I basically explored that and sort of how important it was that these artists had a safe space to practice. There were people in my case study that didn't have those safe spaces, and their outcomes were incredibly different to the artists that did receive the support they needed. But the thing that I really touched on the most at the end of this dissertation was the fact that the support isn't there anymore. The support at the beginning of the 20th century just disappeared, and it became a thing called community care, where people had to basically fend for themselves within their community. And from then on, the only now ability to have these safe spaces for these artists that do have psychosis is for them to be able to afford private, institutions where they can still work, and they can still, for example, Yayoi Kusama, she is a great example of this. She lives in an institution in Japan, and that's because she has the privilege of being able to afford it. So that was basically what my dissertation was about, sort of the notion that these artists deserve support, these artists deserve safe places to practice, and basically showing that there isn't that availability anymore. So that was basically my dissertation.
That's really interesting, and it's interesting the topic of being able to do art if you can afford it, and if you know,
Yeah.
it should be for everybody, and as well, I suppose how in some recent years any sort of creative or artistry tended to be a bit devalued by the government, I think. And
Oh yeah, especially during the pandemic.
yeah, massively.
Yeah, that if you had a creative job, if you were in the creative industries, you were told to retrain, which I thought was ridiculous, because the posters that said these things were created by graphic designers, were created by photographers, and it's just bizarre.
It's crazy. And you know, going back to lockdown, it's such a difficult time for so many people, and I think it was the power of creative things or art forms that really got people through. You know, they'd be listening to music, they'd be reading books, they'd be, you know, identifying with artworks and stuff or whatever. And
baking
and
banana bread.
Yeah.
All sorts.
It's funny, isn't it? It's eye-opening. So, where do you see yourself in 5 years, would you say?